had to take care of a few things first before I came in. So, how is everyone tonight? Okay, shut my little thing off here. There we go. From the chair there. I'm not eating. What? You were just out, so don't you yell at me. No. What? She was just outside because I was just outside with her. Good gracious me. Hey everybody, I am Lady Rain. We are going on to chapter 20 and possibly 21 of Bag of Bones. Let's see, what chapter is this? That's 21. Yeah, I think we can get through that in the next couple hours. I think so. All right, so we were just finding out when we left off that he thinks Joe is trying to tell him about a Carla Dean. And what he said was he knew he wasn't alone. The bell didn't ring. There wasn't a freeze on his neck. But Carla Dean had been in the letters. Joe had wanted him to know. Something else hadn't. Something else had shot past me like the Wabash cannonball, trying to scatter the letters before I could read them. Joe was here. A boy who wept in the night was here too. But what else? What else was sharing my house with me? And that's what we need to find out. So, chapter 20. I didn't see them at first, which wasn't surprising. It seemed that half of Castle Rock was on the town common, and as that sultry Saturday afternoon edged on toward evening. The air was bright with hazy midsummer light, and in it kids swarmed over the playground equipment. A number of old men in bright red vests, some sort of club, I assumed, played chess, and a group of young people lay on the grass listening to a teenager in a headband playing the guitar and singing one I remembered from an old Ian and Sylvia record, a cheery tune that went, Ella Sped was having her lovin' fun. John Martin shot Ella with a Colt 41. I saw no joggers. I saw no dogs chasing frisbees. It was just too goddamn hot. I was turning to look at the band shell where the 8-man combo called the Castle Rockers was setting up. I had an idea in the mood was about as close as they got to rock and roll, when a small person hit me from behind, grabbed me just above the knees, and almost dumping me onto the grass. Gotcha! The small person cried gleefully. Kyra DeVore, Maddie called, sounding both amused and irritated. You almost knocked him down. You'll knock him down. I turned, dropped the grease-spotted McDonald's bag I had been carrying, and lifted the kid up. It felt natural, and it felt wonderful. You don't realize the weight of a healthy child until you hold one, nor do you fully comprehend the life that runs through them like a bright wire. I didn't get choked up. Don't go all corny on me, Mike, Siddy would sometimes whisper when we were kids at the movies and I got wet-eyed at a sad part. But I thought of Joe, yes, and the child she had been carrying when she fell down in that stupid parking lot. Yes, to that too. Kai was squealing and laughing, her arms outspread and her hair hanging down in two amusing clumps, assented by Raggedy Ann and Andy Barrett's. Don't tackle your own quarterback, I yelled, grinning, and to my delight, she yelled it right back to me. Don't tackle your own quarterback. Don't tackle your own quarterback. I set her on her feet, both of us laughing. Kai took a step backward, tripped herself, and sat down on the grass, laughing harder than ever. I had a mean thought then, brief but oh so clear. If only the old lizard could see how much he was missed, how sad we were at his passing. Maddie walked over, and tonight she looked as I'd half imagined her when I first met her, like one of those lovely children of privilege you see at a country club, either goofing with their friends or sitting seriously at dinner with their parents. She was in a white sleeveless dress and low heels, her hair falling loose around her shoulders, a touch of lipstick on her mouth. Her eyes had a brilliance in them that hadn't been there before. When she hugged me, I could smell her perfume and feel the press of her firm little breasts. I kissed her cheek. She kissed me high up on the jaw, making a smack in my ear that I felt all the way down my back. Say things are going to be better now, she whispered, still holding me. Lots better now, I said, and she hugged me again tighter. Then she stepped away. You better have brought plenty of food, big boy, because we plenty hungry women's. Right, Kai? I tackled my own quarterback, Kai said, and then leaned back on her elbows, giggling deliciously at the bright and hazy sky. Come on, I said, and grabbed her by the middle. I toted her that way to a nearby picnic table, Kai kicking her legs and waving her arms and laughing. I sat her down on the bench. She slid off it and beneath the table, boneless as an eel and still laughing. All right, Kyra Elizabeth, Maddie said. Sit up and show the other side. Good girl, she said, clambering up beside me. That's the other side of me, Mike. I'm sure, I said. Inside the bag were Big Macs and fries for Maddie and me. For Kai, there was a colorful box upon which Ronald McDonald and his unindicted co-conspirators capered. Maddie, I got a Happy Meal. Mike got me a Happy Meal. They have toys. We'll see what yours is. Kyra opened the box. Well, see what yours is. Kyra opened the box, poked around, then smiled. It lit up her whole face. She brought out something that I at first thought was a big dust ball. For one horrible second, I was back in my dream, the one of Jo under the bed, with the book over her face. Give me that. She had snarled. It's my dust catcher. And something else, too. Some other association. Perhaps from some other dream. I couldn't get a hold of it. Mike? Maddie asked, curiosity in her voice and maybe borderline concern. It's a doggy, Kai said. I want a doggy in my Happy Meal. Yes, of course, a dog. A little stuffed dog. And it was gray, not black. Although why I'd care about the color either way, I didn't know. That's a pretty good prize, I said, taking it. It was soft, which was good, and it was gray, which was better. Being gray made it all right, somehow. Crazy but true. I handed it back to her and smiled. What's his name? Kai asked, jumping the little dog back and forth across her Happy Meal box. What's Doggy's name, Mike? And without thinking, I said, Strickland. I thought she'd look puzzled, but she didn't. She looked delighted. Stricken, she said, and bounced the dog back and forth in her ever higher leaps over the box. Stricken, my dog Stricken. Who's this guy Strickland? Maddie asked, smiling a little. She had begun to unwrap her hamburger. A character in a book I read once, I said, watching Kai play with the little puffball dog. No one real. My grandpa died, she said 5 minutes later. We were still at the picnic table, but the food was mostly gone. Strickland, the stuffed puffball, had been set to guard the remaining French fries. I had been scanning the ebb and flow of people, wondering who was here from the TR, observing our tryst, and simply burning to carry the news back home. I saw no one I knew, but that didn't mean a whole lot, considering how long I'd been away from this part of the world. Maddie put down her hamburger and looked at Kai with some anxiety, but I thought the kid was okay. She had been giving news, not expressing grief. I know he did, I said. Grandpa was awful old. Kai pinched the couple of French fries between her pudgy little fingers. They rose to her mouth, then glop, all gone. He's with Lord Jesus now. We had all about Lord Jesus and VBS. Yes, Kai, I thought. Right now, Grampy's probably teaching Lord Jesus how to use Pixel Easel and asking if there might be a whore handy. Lord Jesus walked on water and also changed the wine into macaroni. Yes, something like that, I said. It's sad when people die, isn't it? I would be sad if Maddie died, and I would be sad if you died. But Grandpa was old, she said. She said it as though I hadn't quite grasped this concept the first time. In heaven, we'll get all fixed up. That's a good way to look at it, hon, I said. Maddie did maintenance on Kai's dripping barrettes, working carefully and with a kind of absent love. I thought she glowed in the summer light, her skin in smooth, tanned contrast to the white dress she had probably bought at one of the discount stores, and I understood that I loved her. Maybe that was all right. I miss the white Nana, though, Kai said, and this time she did look sad. She picked up the stuffed dog, tried to feed him a French fry, then put him down again. Her small, pretty face looked pensive now, and I could see a whisper of her grandfather in it. It was far back, but it was there, perceptible, another ghost. Mom says white Nana went back to California with Grampy's early remains. Earthly remains, Kybird, Maddie said. That means his body. Will white Nana come back and see me, Mike? I don't know. We had a game. It was all rhymes. She looked more pensive than ever. Your mom told me about the game, I said. She won't be back, Kai said, answering her own question. One very large tear rolled down her right cheek. She picked up Stricken, stood him on his back legs for a second, then put him back on guard duty. Maddie slipped an arm around her, but Kai didn't even notice. White Nana didn't really like me. She was just pretending to like me. That was her job. Maddie and I exchanged a glance. What makes you say that? I asked. Don't know, Kai said. Over by where the kids were playing the guitar, a juggler in white face had started up, working with half a dozen colored balls. Kyra brightened up a little. Mommy, may I go watch the funny white man? Are you done eating? Yeah, I'm full. Thank Mike. Thank Mike. Don't taggle your own quarterback, she said, then laughed kindly to show she was just pulling my leg. Thanks, Mike. Not a problem, I said, and then, because that sounded a little old-fashioned, kitchen. You can go as far as that tree, but no further, Maddie said. And you know why? So you can see me. I will. She grabbed Strickland and started to run off, then stopped and looked over her shoulder at me. I guess it was refrigerator people, she said, then corrected herself very carefully and seriously. The refrigerator people. My heart took a hard double beat in my chest. It was the refrigerator people? What, Kai? I asked. That said white Nana didn't really like me. And she ran off toward the juggler, oblivious to the heat. Maddie watched her go, then turned back to me. I hadn't talked to anybody about Kai's refrigerator people. Neither has she until now. Not that there are any real people, but the letters seem to move around by themselves. It's like a Ouija board. Do they spell things? For a long time she said nothing, then she nodded. Not always, but sometimes, another pause. Most times, actually, Kai calls it mail from the people in the refrigerator. She smiled, but her eyes were a little scared. Are they special magnet letters, do you think? Or have we got a poltergeist working the lakefront? I don't know. I'm sorry I brought them, if they're a problem. Don't be silly. You gave them to her, and you're a tremendous big deal to her right now. She talks about you all the time. She has much more interested in picking out something pretty to wear for you tonight than she was in her grandfather's death. I was supposed to wear something pretty, too, Kyra insisted. She's not that way about people usually. She takes them when they're there and leaves them when they're gone. That's not such a bad way for a little girl to grow up, I sometimes think. You're both dressed pretty, I said. That much I'm sure of. Thanks. She looked fondly at Kai, who stood by the tree watching the juggler. He had put his rubber balls aside and moved on to Indian clubs. Then she looked back at me. Are we done eating? I nodded, and Maddie began to pick up the trash and stuffed it back into the takeout bag. I helped, and when our fingers touched, she gripped my hand and squeezed. Thank you, she said, for everything you've done. Thank you so damn much. I squeezed back and then let go. You know, she said, it's crossed my mind that Kyra's moving the letters around herself mentally. Telekinesis? I guess that's the technical term, only Kai can't spell much more than dog or cat. What's showing up on the refrigerator? Names mostly. Once it was yours. Once it was your wife's. Joe. The whole thing. Joanna. And Nana. Roget, I presume. Jared shows up sometimes, and Bridget. Once it was Keto. She spelled it. Keto, I asked, and thought, Kyra, Kia, Keto. What is this? A boy's name, do you think? I know it is. It's Swahili. It means precious child. I looked it up in the baby names book. She glanced toward her own precious child as we walked across the grass to the nearest trash barrel. Any others that you can remember? She thought. Reg has showed up a couple of times. And once there was Carla. You understand that Kai can't even read those names as a rule, don't you? She has to ask me what they say. Has it occurred to you that Kyra might be copying them out of a book or magazine? That she's learning to write using magnetic letters on the fridge instead of paper and pencil? I suppose that's possible. She didn't look as if she believed it, though. Not surprising, I didn't believe it myself. I mean, you never actually seen the letters moving around by themselves on the front of the fridge, have you? I hoped I sounded as unconcerned, asking this question, as I wanted to. She laughed a bit nervously. God, no. Anything else? Sometimes the refrigerator people leave messages like hi and bye and good girl. There was one yesterday that I wrote down to show Kyra. Kyra asked me to. Or to show you. Kyra asked me to. It's really weird. What is it? I'd rather show you, but I left it on the glove compartment of the Scout. Remind me when we go. Yes, I would. This was some spooky shit, senor, she said, like the writing in the flower that time. I thought about telling her that I had refrigerator people, then didn't. She had enough to worry about without that, or so I told myself. We stood side by side on the grass, watching Kai watch the juggler. Did you call John, I asked. You bet. His reaction? She turned to me, laughing with her eyes. He actually sang a verse of Ding Dong the Witch is Dead. Wrong sex, right sentiment. She nodded, her eyes going back to Kyra. I thought again how beautiful she looked. Her body slim in the white dress, her features clean and perfectly made. Was he pissed at me inviting myself to lunch, I asked. Nope. He loved the idea of having a party. A party? He loved the idea. I began to feel rather small. He even suggested we invite your lawyer from last Friday, Mr. Bissonette, plus a private detective John, the private detective John hired by Mr. Bassonette's recommendation. Is that okay with you? Fine. How about you, Maddie? Doing okay? Doing okay, she agreed. Turning to me, I did have several more calls than usual today. I'm suddenly quite popular. Uh-oh. Most were hang-ups, but one gentleman took time enough to call me a cunt, and there was a lady with a very strong Yankee accent who said, There, you bitch, you've killed him. Are you satisfied? She hung up before I could tell her yes, very satisfied, thanks. But Maddie didn't look satisfied. She looked unhappy and guilty, as if she had literally wished him dead. I'm sorry. It's okay, really. Kyra and I have been alone for a long time, and I've been scared for most of it. Now, I've made a couple of friends, and if a few anonymous phone calls are the price I have to pay, I'll pay it. She was very close, looking at me, and I couldn't help myself. I put the blame on summer, her perfume, and 4 years without a woman. In that order, I slipped my arms around her waist and remember perfectly the texture of her dress beneath my hands, the slight pucker at the back where the zipper hid in its sleeve. I remember the sensation of cloth moving against the bare skin beneath. And then I was kissing her, very gently but very thoroughly. Anything worth doing is worth doing right. And she was kissing me back in exactly the same spirit. Her mouth curious but not afraid. Her lips were warm and smooth and held some faint, sweet taste. Peaches, I think. We stopped at the same time and pulled back a little from each other. Her hands were still on my shoulders. Mine were on the sides of her waist, just above her hips. Her face was composed enough, but her eyes were more brilliant than ever, and there were slants of color in her cheeks, rising along the cheekbones. "Oh boy," she said, "I really wanted that. Ever since Kai tackled you and you picked her up, I wanted it." "John wouldn't think much of us kissing in public," I said. My voice wasn't quite even, and my heart was racing. 7 seconds, one kiss, and every system in my body was redlining. In fact, Jordan wouldn't think of much of us kissing at all. He fancies you, you know. "I know, but I fancy you." She turned to check on Kai, who was still standing obediently by the tree, watching the juggler. Who might be watching us? Someone who had come over from the TR on the hot summer evening to get ice cream at Frank's Tasty Freeze and enjoy a little music and society on the common. Someone who traded fresh vegetables and fresh gossip at the Lakeview General. A regular at the all-purpose garage. This was insanity, and it stayed insanity no matter how you cut it. I dropped my hands from her waist. "Maddie, they could put our picture next to indiscreet in the dictionary." She took her hands off my shoulders and stepped back a pace, but her brilliant eyes never left mine. "I know that. I'm young, but not entirely stupid. I didn't mean." She held up a hand to stop me. "Kai goes to bed around 9. You can't seem to sleep until it's mostly dark. I stay up later. Come and visit me if you want to. You can park around back." She smiled a little. It was a sweet smile. It was also incredibly sexy. Once the moon's down, there's an area of discretion. "Maddie, you're young enough to be my daughter." "Maybe, but I'm not. And sometimes people can be too discreet for their own good." My body knew so emphatically what I wanted. If we had been in her trailer at that moment, it would have been no contest. It was almost no contest anyway. Then something recurred to me. Something I'd thought about Devor's ancestors and my own. The generations didn't match up. Wasn't the same thing true here? And I don't believe the people automatically have the right to do what they want, no matter how badly they want it. Not every thirst should be slaked. Some things are just wrong. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But I wasn't sure this was one of them, and I wanted her all right, so much. I kept thinking about how her dress had slid when I put my arms around her waist. The warm feel of her skin just beneath. And no, she wasn't my daughter. "You said your thanks," I told her in a dry voice. "And that's enough, really." "You think this is gratitude?" Her voice was a low, tense laugh. "You're 40, Mike, not 80. You're not Harrison Ford, but you're a good-looking man, talented and interesting, too. And I like you such an awful lot. I want you to be with me." "Do you want me to say please?" "Fine, please be with me." Yes, this was about more than gratitude. I suppose I'd known that even when I was using the word. I'd known she was wearing white shorts and a halter top. when she called on the phone the day I went back to work? Had she also known what I was wearing? Had she dreamed she was in bed with me, the two of us screwing our brains out, while the party lights shone and Sarah Tidwell played her version of the White Nana rhyming game? All that crazy, manderly, sanderly, canderly stuff. Had Maddie dreamed of telling me to do what she wanted? And there were the refrigerator people. They were another kind of sharing, an even spookier kind. I hadn't quite had the nerve enough to tell Maddie about mine, but she might know anyway. Down low in her mind, down below in her mind, where the blue-collar guys move around in the zone. Her guys and my guys, all part of the same strange labor union. And maybe it wasn't an issue of morality per se at all. Something about it, about us, just felt dangerous and oh so attractive. I need time to think, I said. This isn't about what you think. What do you feel for me? So much it scares me. Before I could say anything else, my ears caught a familiar series of chord changes. I turned toward the kid with the guitar. He had been working through a repertoire of early Dylan, and now he swung into something chuggy and up-tempo, something that made you want to grin and pat your hands together. Do you want to go fishing? Here in my fishing hole. Said, do you want to fish some, honey? Here in my fishing hole. Do you want to fish in my pond, baby? You better have a big long pole. Fishin' Blues, written by Sarah Tidwell, originally performed by Sarah and the Red Top Boys, covered by everyone from Ma Rainey to the Lovin' Spoon. The raunchy ones had been her specialty. Double entendre, so thin, maybe it's double entendre, so thin you could read a newspaper through it, although reading hadn't been Sarah's main interest, judging by her lyrics. Before the kid could go into the next verse, something about how you got to wiggle when you wobble and get that big one way down deep, the Castle Rockers ran off a brass flourish that said, "Shut up, everyone. We're coming at ya." The kid quit playing his guitar. The jugglers began catching his Indian clubs and dropping them swiftly onto the grass in a line. The rockers launched themselves into an extremely evil salsa match, music to commit serial murders by, and Kyra came running back to us. The rockers launched themselves into an extremely evil salsa march, music to commit serial murders by. The jugster's done. Will you tell me the story, Mike? Hansel and Pencil? It's Hansel and Gretel, I said, and I'll be happy to. But let's go where it's a little quieter, okay? Band is giving me a headache. Music hurt your heady? A little bit. We'll go to Maddie's car then. Good thought. Kyra ran ahead to stake out a bench on the edge of the common. Maddie gave a long, warm look, then her hand. I took it. Our fingers folded together as if they had been doing it for years, I thought. I'd like it to be slow, both of us hardly moving at all, at first anyway, and I would bring my nicest, longest pull. I think you could count on that. And then afterward we'd talk. Maybe until we could see the furniture in the first early light, when you're in bed with someone you love, particularly for the first time. 5 o'clock seems almost holy. You needed vacation from your own thoughts, Maddie said. I bet most writers do from time to time. That's probably true. I wish we were home, she said, and I couldn't tell if her fierceness was real or pretend. I'd kiss you until this whole conversation became irrelevant, and if there were second thoughts, at least you'd be having them in my bed. I turned my face into a red light of the westering sun. Here or there, At this hour, Kai would still be up. True, she said, sounding uncharacteristically glum. True. Kyra reached a bench near the sign reading Town Common Parking and climbed up on it, holding the little stuffed dog from Mickey D's in one hand. I tried to pull my hand away as we approached her, and Maddie held it firm. It's all right, Mike. At VBS, they hold hands at their friends with their friends everywhere they go. It's big people who make it into a big deal. She stopped, looked at me. I want you to know something. Maybe it won't matter to you, but it does to me. There wasn't anyone before Lance, and no one after. If you come to me, you'll be my second. I'm not going to talk with you about this again either. Saying please is all right, but I won't beg. I don't. There's a pot with tomato plants in it by the trailer steps. I'll leave a key under it. Don't think. Just come. Not tonight, Maddie. I can't. You can, she replied. Hurry up, slowpokes, Kyra cried, bouncing on the bench. He's the slow one, Maddie called back, and poked her in the ribs. Then, in a much lower voice, you are too. She unwound her hand from mine and ran toward her daughter. Oh, she poked him in the ribs. Her brown legs scissoring below the hem of the white dress. In my version of Hansel and Gretel, the witch was named Depravia. Kyra stared at me with huge eyes when I got to the part where Depravia asked Hansel to poke out his finger so she can see how plump he's getting. Is it scary too? Is it too scary, I asked. Kyra shook her head empathetically. I glanced at Maddie to make sure. She nodded and waved a hand for me to go on. So I finished the story. Depravia went into the oven, and Gretel found her secret stash of winning lottery tickets. The kids bought a jet ski and lived happily ever after on the eastern side of Dark Squirrel Lake. By then, the Castle Rockers were slaughtering Gershwin, and sunset was nigh. I carried Kyra to Scouty, and strapped her in. I remember the first time I'd helped put the kid in her car seat, an inadvertent press on Maddie's breast. I hope there isn't a bad dream for you in that story, I said, until I heard it coming out of my mouth. I hadn't realized how fundamentally awful that one was. I won't have bad dreams, Kyra said matter-of-factly. The refrigerator people will keep them away. Then carefully reminding herself, refrigerator. She turned to Maddie. Show him the crosspatch, mummy bummy. Crossword. But thanks, I would have forgotten. She thumbed open the glove. She thumbed open the glove compartment and took out a folded piece of paper. It was on the fridge this morning. I copied it down because Kyra said you'd know what it meant. She said you do crossword puzzles. Well, she said cross patches, but I got the idea. Had I told Kyra that I did crosswords? Almost certainly not. Did it surprise me that she knew? Not at all. I took the sheet of paper, unfolded it, and looked at what was printed. Go W92. Is it a cross-patch puzzle, Mike? Cross-patch puzzle, Mike? Kyra asked. I guess so. A very simple one. But if it means something, I don't know what it is. May I keep this? Yes, Maddie said. I walked her around to the driver's side of the Scout, reached for her hand again as we went. Just give me a little time. I know that's supposed to be the girls' line, but take the time, she said. Just don't take too much. I didn't want to take much, which was just the problem. The sex would be great, I knew that, but after? There might be an after, though. I knew it, and she did too. With Maddie, after was a real possibility. The idea was a little scary, a little wonderful. I kissed the corner of her mouth. She laughed and grabbed me by the earlobe. You can do better, she said. Then she looked at Kai, who was sitting in her car seat and gazing at us interestedly. But I'll let you off this time. Kiss, Kai, Kyra called, holding out her arms. So I went around and kissed Kai, driving home wearing my dark glasses to cut the glare of the setting sun. It occurred to me that maybe I could be Kyra Devore's father. That seemed almost as attractive to me as going to bed with her mother, which was a measure of how deep I was in, and going deeper maybe, deeper still. Sara Laughs seemed very empty after having Maddie in my arms, a sleeping head without dreams. I checked the letters on the fridge, saw nothing there but the normal scatter, and got a beer. I went on to the deck to drink it while I watched the last of the sunset. I tried to think about the refrigerator people and cross patches that had appeared on both refrigerators. Go down 19. On lane 42 and go down 92 on Wasp Hill Road. Different vectors from the land on the lake. Different spots on the street. Shit, who knew? I tried to think about John Sturrow and how unhappy he was apt to be if he found out there was, to quote Sara Laughs, who got to the line long before John Mellencamp, another mule kicking in Maddie Devore's stall. But mostly, what I thought about was holding her for the first time, kissing her for the first time. No human instinct is more powerful than the sex drive when it is fully aroused, and its awakening images are emotional tattoos that never leave us. For me, it was feeling the soft bare skin of her waist just beneath her dress, the slippery feel of the fabric. I turned abruptly and hurried toward the house to the north wing, almost running, shedding clear clothes as I went. I turned the shower on to full cold and stood under it for 5 minutes shivering. When I got out, I felt a little bit more like an actual human being and a little less like a twitching bundle of nerve endings. And as I toweled dry, something else recurred to me. At some point, I had thought of Joe's brother Frank, had thought that if anyone besides myself would be able to feel Joe's presence in Sara Laughs, it would be him. I hadn't gotten around to inviting him down yet, and now wasn't sure I wanted to. I had come to feel oddly possessive, almost jealous, about what was happening here. And yet if Joe had been writing something on the quiet, Frank might know. Of course, she hadn't confided in him about the pregnancy, but I looked at my watch, 9:15. In the trailer near the intersection of Wasp Hill Road and Route 96, Kyra was probably already asleep, and her mother might already have put her extra key under the pot near the steps. I thought of her in the white dress, the swell of her hips just below my hands, and the smell of her perfume, then pushed the images away. I couldn't spend the whole night taking cold showers. 9:15 was still early enough to call Frank Arlen. He picked up on the second ring, sounding both happy to hear from me and as if he'd gotten 3 or 4 cans further into the six-pack than I had so far done. We passed the usual pleasantries back and forth, most of our own, almost entirely fictional. I was dismayed to find, and he mentioned, that a famous neighbor of mine had kicked the bucket according to the news. Had I met him? Yes, I said, remembering how Max DeVore had run his wheelchair at me. Yes, I'd met him. Frank wanted to know what he was like. That was hard to say, I told him. Poor old guy was stuck in a wheelchair and suffering from emphysema. Pretty frail, huh? Frank asked sympathetically. Yeah, I said. Listen, Frank, I called about Joe. I was out in her studio looking around, and I found my typewriter. Since then, I've kind of gotten an idea she was writing something. It might have started as a little piece about our house and then widened. The place is named it was named after Sarah Tidwell, the blues singer. A long pause, then Frank said, I know. His voice sounded heavy and grave. What else do you know, Frank? That she was scared. I think she found out something that scared her. I think that mostly because that was when the light finally broke. I probably should have known from Maddie's description, would have known If I hadn't been so upset. You were down here with her, weren't you? In July of '94? You went to the softball game. Then you went back to the street to up the street to the house. How do you know that? He almost barked. Someone saw you, a friend of mine. I was trying to sound not to sound mad and not succeeding. I was mad, but it was a relieved anger, the kind you feel when your kid comes dragging into the house with a shamefaced grin just as you were getting ready to call the cops. I almost told you the day or two before we buried her. We were in that pub. Do you remember? Jack's pub? Right after Frank had beaten the funeral director down on the price of Joe's coffin. Sure, I remembered. I even remembered the look in his eyes when I told him Joe had been pregnant when she died. He must have felt the silence spinning out because he came back sounding anxious. Mike, I hope you didn't get any, what, wrong ideas? I thought maybe she was having an affair. How's that for a wrong idea? You can call that ignoble if you want, but I had my reasons. There was a lot she wasn't telling me. What did she tell you? Next to nothing. Did you know she quit all her boards and committees? Quit and never said a word to me? No. I didn't think he was lying. Why would he? At this late date. Jesus, Mike, if I'd have known that. What happened that day you came down here? Tell me. We went to the print shop in Sandfield. Joe called me from, I don't remember, I think a rest area on the turnpike between Derry and the TR. Yeah, she was on her way to Sara Laughs and wanted me to meet her there. She told me to park in the driveway if I got there first, not to go in the house, which I could have. I know where you keep the spare key. Sure he did. In the Sucrets tin under the deck. I had shown him myself. Did she say why she didn't want you to go inside? It'll sound crazy. No, it won't, believe me. She said the house was dangerous. For a moment, the words just hung there, and then I said, Did you get here first? Uh-huh, and waited outside. Yes. Did you see or sense anything dangerous? There was a pause. At last he said, There are lots of people out in the lake. Speedboaters, water skiers, you know how it is, but all the engine noise and the laughter seemed to kind of stop dead when it got near the house. Have you ever noticed that it seems quiet there even when it's not? Of course I had. Sarah seemed to exist in its own zone of silence. Did it feel dangerous, though? No, he said almost reluctantly. Not to me, anyway. But it didn't feel exactly empty, either. I felt, I felt watched. I sat on one of those railroad tie steps and waited for my sis. Finally, she came. She parked behind my car and hugged me, but she never took her eyes off the house. I asked her what she was up to, and she said she couldn't tell me, and that I couldn't tell you we'd been there. She had something like, if he finds out on his own, then it's meant to be. I'll have to tell him sooner or later, anyway, but I can't now because I need his whole attention. I can't get that while he's working. I felt a flush crawl across my skin. She'd said that, huh? Yeah, then she said she had to go in the house and do something. She wanted me to wait outside. She said if she called, I should come on the run. Otherwise, I should just stay where I was. She wanted someone there in case she got in trouble. Yeah, but it had to be someone who wouldn't ask a lot of questions she didn't want to answer. That was me. I guess that was always me. And she went inside. I sat on the hood of my car, smoked cigarettes. I was still smoking then, and I did start to feel that something then that wasn't right. As if there might be someone in the house who'd been waiting for her, someone who didn't like her. Maybe someone who wanted to hurt her? Probably I just picked that up from Joe, the way her nerves seemed all strung up, the way she kept looking over my shoulder at the house, even while she was hugging me. But it seemed like something else, I don't know, like a vibe. Yes! He almost shouted, a vibration. And not a good vibration, like the Beach Boys song, A Bad Vibration. What happened? I sat and waited. I only smoked 2 cigarettes, so I don't guess it had been longer than 20 minutes or half an hour, but it seemed longer. I kept noticing how the sounds from the lake seemed to make it most of the way up the hill and then just kind of quit, and how there didn't seem to be any birds except far off in the distance. Once she came out, I heard the deck door bang, and then her footsteps on the stairs over on that side. I called to her, asked if she was okay. She said fine. She said for me to stay where I was. She sounded a little out of breath, as if she was carrying something or had been doing some chore. Did she go to her studio or down to the lake? I don't know. She was gone another 15 minutes or so, time enough for me to smoke another bud. And then she came back out the front door. She checked to make sure it was locked, and then she came up to me. She looked a lot better, relieved. The way people look when they do some dirty job they've been putting off. Finally, get it behind them. She suggested we walk down that path she called the street to the resort. That's down there, Warrington's. Right, right. She said she'd buy me a beer and a sandwich, which she did, out at the end of this long floating dock, the Sunset Bar, where I had first glimpsed Roget. Then you went to look at the softball game. That was Joe's idea. She had 3 beers to my one, and she insisted. Said someone was going to hit a long shot homer into the trees. She just knew it. Now I had a clear picture of the part Maddie had seen and told me about. Whatever Joe had done, it had left her almost giddy with relief. She had ventured into the house for one thing, had dared the spirits in order to do her business and survived. She'd had 3 beers in celebration, and her discretion had slipped. Not that she had behaved any great stealth on her previous trips down to the TR. Frank remembered her saying, if I found out on my own that it was meant to be, que sera, sera. It wasn't the attitude of someone hiding an affair, and I realized now that all her behavior suggested a woman keeping a short-term secret. She would have told me when I finished my stupid book, if she had lived. If. You watched the game for a while and then went back to the house along the street? Yes, he said. Did either of you go in? No. By the time we got there, her buzz had worn off, and I trusted her to drive. She was laughing while we were at the softball game, but she wasn't laughing by the time we got back to the house. She looked at it and said, I'm done with her. I'll never go through that door again, Frank. My skin first chilled, then pricked. I asked her what was wrong, what she'd found out. I knew she was writing something. She told me that much. She told you everyone but me, I said, and without much bitterness. I knew who the man in the brown sport coat had been, and any bitterness and anger at Joe, anger at myself, paled before the relief of that. I hadn't realized how much that fellow had been on my mind until now. She must have had her reasons, Frank said. You know that, don't you? But she didn't tell you what they were. All I know is that it started, whatever it was, with her doing research for an article. It was a lark. Joe played Nancy Drew. I'm pretty sure that at first not telling you was just to keep it a surprise. She read books, but mostly she talked to people, listening to their stories of the old days, and teased them into looking for old letters, diaries. She was good at that part of it, I think. Damn good. You don't know any of this? No, I said heavily. Joe hadn't been having an affair, but she could have had one if she'd wanted. She could have had an affair with Tom Selleck and been written up in Inside View, and I would have gone on tapping away at the keys of my power book, blissfully unaware. Whatever she found out, Frank said, I think she just stumbled over it. And you never told me 4 years, and you never told me any of it. That was the last time I was with her, Frank said. And now he didn't sound apologetic or embarrassed at all. And the last thing she asked of me was that I not tell you we'd been at the lake house. She said she'd tell you everything when she was ready, but then she died. After that, I didn't think it mattered, Mike. She was my sister. She was my sister, and I promised. All right, I understand. And I did. Just not enough. What had Joe discovered? That normal Oster, her infant son, under a hand pump? That back around the turn of the century, an animal trap had been left in a place where a young Negro boy would be apt to come along and step into it? That another boy, perhaps the incestuous child of son and Sarah Tidwell, had been drowned by his mother in the lake? She may be laughing, that smoke-broken, lunatic laugh, as she held him down. You gotta wiggle when you wobble, honey, and hold that young'un way down deep. If you need me to apologize, Mike, consider it done. I don't, Frank. Do you remember anything else she might have said that night? Anything at all? She said she knew how you found the house. She said, what? She said that when it wanted you, it called you. At first, I couldn't reply because Frank Arlen had completely demolished one of the assumptions I'd made about my married life, one of the biggies, one of those that seem so basic you don't even think about questioning them. Gravity hits you down. Light allows you to see. The compass needle points north, stuff like that. The assumption was that Joe was the one who had wanted to buy Sara Laughs back when we saw the first real money from my writing career, because Joe was the house person in our marriage, just as I was the car person. Joe was the one who had picked our apartments when apartments were all we could afford. Joe who hung a picture here and asked me to put up a shelf there. Joe was the one who had fallen in love with the dairy house and had finally worn down my resistance to the idea that it was too big, too busy, too broken to take on. Joe had been the nest builder. She said that when it wanted you, it called you. And it was probably true. No, I could do no better than that. And if I was willing to set aside the lazy thinking and selective remembering, it was certainly true. I was the one who had first broached the idea of a place in western Maine. I was the one who collected stacks of real estate brochures and hauled them home. I had started buying regional magazines like Down East and always began at the back, where the real estate ads were. It was I who had first seen the picture of Sara Laughs in the glossy handout called Maine Retreats. And it was I who had made the call first to the agent named in the ad, and then to Marie Hingerman after badgering Marie's name out of the realtor. Joanna had also been charmed by Sara Laughs. I think anyone would have been charmed by it, seeing it for the first time in autumn sunshine, with the trees blazing all around it and drifts of colored leaves blowing up the street. But it was I who had actively sought the place out. Except that was more lazy thinking and selective remembering, wasn't it? Sara had sought me out. That's how I could have, that's how could, then how could I have not, oh my gosh, then how could I have not known, how could I not have known it until now? And how was I led here in the first place, full of unknowing, happy ignorance? The answer to both questions was the same. It was also the answer to the question of how Joe could have discovered something distressing about the house, the lake, maybe the whole TR, and then gotten away with not telling me. I'd been gone that's all. I'd been zoning, tranced out, writing one of my stupid little books. I'd been hypnotized by the fantasies going on in my head, and a hypnotized man is easy to lead. Mike, are you still there? I'm here, Frank, but I'll be goddamned if I know what could have scared her so. She mentioned one other name. Name I remember. Royce Merrill. She said he was the one who remembered the most because he was so old. And she said, I don't want Mike to talk to him. I'm afraid that old man might let the cat out of the bag and tell him more than he should know. Any idea what she meant? Well, it's been suggested that a splinter from an old family tree wound up here. But my mother's people were from Memphis. The Noonans are from Maine, and not from this part. But not from this part. Yet, I no longer entirely believe this. Mike, you sound almost sick. I'm okay, better than I was, actually. And you understand why I didn't tell you any of this until now? I mean, if I'd known the ideas you were getting, if I'd had any clue. I think I understand. The ideas didn't belong in my head to begin with. But once that shit starts to creep in. When I got back to Sanford that night and it was over, I guess I thought it was just more of Joe's, oh fuck, there's a shadow on the moon, nobody go out until tomorrow. She was always a superstitious one, knocking on wood, tossing a pinch of salt over her shoulder if she spilled some. Those 4-leaf clover earrings she used to have, or the way she wouldn't wear a pullover if she put it on backward by mistake, I said. She claimed doing that would turn around your whole day. Well, doesn't it? Frank asked. And I could hear the little smile in his voice. All at once I remembered Joe completely, right down to the small gold flecks of her left eye, and wanted nobody else. Nobody else would do. She thought there was something bad about the house, Frank said. That much I do know. I drew a piece of paper to me and jotted Kai on it. Yes, and by then she may have suspected she was pregnant. She might have been afraid of influences. There are influences here, all right. You think she got most of this from Royce Merrill? No, that was just a name she mentioned. She probably talked to dozens of people. Do you know a guy named Gloucester, something like that? Oster, I said. Below Kai, my pencil was making a series of fat loops that might have been cursive little L's or hair ribbons. Kenny Oster, was that it? Sounds right. In any case, you know how she was once she really got going on a thing? Yes, like a terrier after rats. Mike, should I come up there? No. Now I was sure. No, now I was sure. Not Harold Oblonsky, not Frank either. There was a process going on in Sara. Something as delicate and as organic as rising bread in a warm oven. Frank might interrupt that process or be hurt by it. No, I just wanted to get it cleared up. Besides, I'm writing. It's hard for me to have people around when I'm writing. Will you call if I can help? You bet, I said. I hung up the telephone, thumbed through the book, and found a listing for R. Merrill on the Deep Bay Road. I called the number listed and it rung a dozen times, then hung up. No newfangled answer machine for Royce. I wondered idly where he was. 95 seemed a little too old to go dancing at the country barn in Harrison, especially on a close night like this one. I looked at the paper with Kai written on it. Below the fat L shapes, I wrote Kyra and remembered how. The first time I had heard Kai say her name, I thought it was Kai she was saying. Below Kyra, I wrote Keto. Hesitated, then wrote Carla. I put those names in a box. Beside them, I jostled I jotted Joanna, Bridget, and Jared, the refrigerator people. Folks who wanted me to go down 19 and go down 92. Go down, Moses. You're bound for the promised land, I told the empty house. I looked around, just me and Bunter and the wacky clock, except it wasn't. When it wanted you, it called you. I got up to get another beer. The fruits and vegetables were in a circle again. In the middle, the letter spelled lie still. Lyestille. As on some old tombstones, God grant she lies still. I looked at those letters for a long time. Then I remembered the IBM was still out on the deck. I brought it in, plunked it on the dining room table, and began to work on my current stupid little book. 15 minutes and I was lost, only faintly aware of thunder someplace over the lake, only faintly aware of Bunter's bell shivering from time to time. When I went back to the refrigerator an hour or so later for another beer and saw that the words in the circle now said, Oni lie still, ONYLYESTILLE. I hardly noticed. At that moment, I didn't care if they lay still or danced the hucklebuck by the light of the silvery moon. John Shackelford had begun to remember his past, and the child whose only friend he, John, had been. Little, neglected Ray Garrity. I rode until midnight came. By then the thunder had faded away, and the heat held on. But the heat held on, as oppressive as a blanket. I turned off the IBM and went to bed, thinking, so far as I can remember, nothing at all. Not even about Maddie, lying in her own bed, not so many miles away. The writing had burned off all thoughts of the real world, at least temporarily. I think that in the end, that's what it's for. Good or bad, it passes the time. We're going to get as far as we can before 9 o'clock. Mm-hmm. Chapter 21. I was walking north along the street. Japanese lanterns lined it, but they were all dark because it was daylight, bright daylight. The muggy, smudgy look of the mid-July was gone. The sky was that deep sapphire shade which is the sole property of October. The lake was deepest indigo beneath it, sparkling with sun points. The trees were just past the peak of their autumn colors, burning like torches. The wind out of the south blew the fallen leaves past me and between my legs in rattly, fragrant gusts. The Japanese lanterns nodded as if in approval of the season. Up ahead, faintly, I could hear music. Sara and the Red Tops. Sara was belting it out, laughing her way through the lyric as she always had. Only, how could laughter sound so much like a snarl? White boy, I'd never kill a child of mine, that you'd ever even think it. I whirled, expecting to see her right behind me. There was no one there. Well, the green lady was there, only she had changed her dress of leaves for autumn and become a yellow lady. The bare pine branch behind her still pointed the way. Go north, young man, go north. Not much farther down the path was another birch, the one I'd held onto when that horrible drowning sensation had come over me again. I waited for it to come now, for my mouth and throat to fill up with the iron taste of the lake, but it didn't happen. I looked back at the yellow lady, then beyond her to Sara Laughs. The house was there, but much reduced. No north wing, no south wing, no second story. No sign of Joe's studio off to the side either. None of those things had been built yet. The Lady Birch had traveled back with me from 98. So had the one hanging over the lake. Otherwise, where am I? I asked the yellow lady, and the nodding Japanese lanterns. Then a better question occurred to me. When am I? No answer. It's a dream, isn't it? I'm in bed and dreaming. Somewhere out in the brilliant gold sparkling net of the lake, a loon called twice. Hoot for once for yes, twice for no, I thought. Not a dream, Michael. I don't know exactly what it is. Spiritual, time travel maybe, but it's not a dream. Is this really happening? I asked the day, and from somewhere back in the trees, where the track which would eventually come to be known as Lane 42, ran toward the dirt road, which would eventually come to be known as Route 68, a crow cawed just once. I went to the birch hanging over the lake, slipped my arm around it, doing it lit a trace memory of slipping my hands around Maddie's waist, feeling her dress slide over her skin, and peered into the lake, half wanting to see the drowned boy, half fearing to see him. There was no boy there, but something lay at the bottom where he had been, among the rocks and roots and waterweed. I squinted, and just then the wind died a little, stilling the glints on the water. It was a cane, one with a gold head. A Boston Post cane. Wrapped around it was a rising spiral, their ends waving lazily, where what appeared to be a pair of ribbons, white ones with bright red edges. Seeing Royce's cane wrapped that way made me think of a high school graduations, and the batons the class marshal waves as he or she leads the gowned seniors to their seats. Now I understood why the old crock hadn't answered the phone. Merrill's answering machine days were all done. I knew that. I also knew I had come to a time before Royce had even been born. Sarah Tidwell was here. I could hear her singing. And when Royce had been born in 1903, Sarah had already been gone for 2 years. She and her whole red top family. Go down, Moses, I said. I told the ribbon-wrapped cane in the water. You bound for the promised land. I walked on toward the sound of music, invigorated by the cool air and rushing wind. Now I could hear voices as well, lots of them, talking and shouting and laughing. Rising above them and pumping like a piston was a hoarse cry of a sideshow barker. Come on in, folks! Hurry, hurry, hurry! It's all on the inside, but you gotta hurry. Next show starts in 10 minutes. See Angelina and the steak woman? She shimmies, she shakes. She'll bewitch your eyes and steal your heart. But don't get too close, for her bite is poison. See Hando and Dog-Faced Boy, terror of the South Seas. Oh, Hando, the Dog-Faced Boy. See the human skeleton, see the human Gila monster, relic of the time God forgot. See the bearded lady and all the killer Martians. It's on the inside, yes sirree, so hurry, hurry, hurry. I could hear the steam-driven jalopy, or calliope, oh my gosh, calliope of a merry-go-round, and the bang of the bell at the top of the post as some lumberjack won a stuffed toy for his sweetie. You could tell from the delighted feminine screams that he'd hit it almost hard enough to pop it off the post. There was the snap of 22s from the shooting gallery, and the snoring moo of someone's prize cow. and now I began to smell the aromas I had associated with county fairs since I was a boy. Sweet fried dough, grilled onions and peppers, cotton candy, manure, hay. I began to walk faster as the strum of the guitars and thud of double basses grew louder. My heart kicked into a higher gear. I was going to see them perform, actually see Sara Laughs and the Red Tops live and on stage. This was no crazy three-part fever dream either. This was happening right now, so hurry, hurry, hurry. The Washburn place, the one that would always be the Bricker place to Mrs. M, was gone. Beyond where it would eventually be, rising up the steep slope on the eastern side of the street, was a flight of broad wooded stairs. They reminded me of the ones which had led from the amusement park to the beach at Old Orchard. Here the Japanese lanterns were lit in spite of the brightness of the day, and the music was louder than ever. Sara was singing Jimmy Crack Corn. I climbed the stairs toward the laughter and shouts. The sounds of the red tops and the calliope. I don't know what that word is. Calliope. Calliope. The smells of fried food and farm animals. Above the stairhead was a wooden arch with "Welcome to Freiburg Fair. Welcome to the 20th century" printed on it. As I watched, a little boy in short pants and a woman wearing a shirt waist and an ankle-length linen skirt walked under the arch and toward me. They shimmered through gauzy. For a moment, I could see their skeletons and their bone grins, which lurked beneath their laughing faces. A moment later, and they were gone. Two farmers, one wearing a straw hat, the other gesturing expansively with a corncob pipe, appeared on the far side of the arch in the exact same fashion. In this way I understood that there was a barrier between the street and the fair, yet I did not think it was a barrier which would affect me. I was an exception. Is that right? I asked. Can I go in? The bell on the top of the test your strength pole banged loud and clear. Bong for once for yes and twice for no. I continued on up the stairs. Now I could see the Ferris wheel turning against the brilliant sky, the wheel that had been on the background of the band photo in Austen's Dark Score days. The framework was metal, but the brightly blah blah blah, but the brightly painted gondolas were made of wood. Leading up to it, like an aisle leading up to an altar, was a broad sawdust strewn midway. The sawdust was there for a purpose. Almost every man I saw was chewing tobacco. I paused for a few seconds at the top of the stairs, still on the lakeside of the arch. I was afraid of what might happen to me if I passed under. Afraid of dying or disappearing, yes, but mostly of never being able to return the way I came, of being condemned to spend eternity as the visitor to the turn of the century Freiburg Fair. That was also like the Ray Bradbury story, now that I thought of it. In the end, what drew me into the other world was Sarah Tidwell. I had to see her with my own eyes. I had to watch her sing. Had to. I felt a tingling as I stepped beneath the arch, and there was a sighing in my ears as of a million voices very far away. Sighing in relief, dismay, I couldn't tell. All I knew for sure was that being on the other side was different. The difference between looking at the thing through the window and actually being there. The difference between observing and participating. Colors jumped out like ambushers at the moment of attack. The smells, which had been sweet and evocative and nostalgic on the lake side of the arch, were now rough and sexy, prose instead of poetry. I could smell dense sausages and frying beef, and the vast, shadowy aroma of boiling chocolate. Two kids walked past me sharing a paper cone of cotton candy. Both of them were hanky were clutching knotted hankies with their little bits of change in them. "Hey, kids," a barker in the dark blue shirt called to them. He was wearing arm garters, and his smile revealed one splendid gold tooth. "Knock over the milk bottles and win a prize. I ain't had a loser all day." Up ahead, the red tops swung into fishin' blues. I thought I'd thought the kid on the common in Castle Rock was pretty good, but this version made the kids sound old and slow and clueless. It was cute, like an antique picture of ladies with their skirts held up to their knees, dancing a decorous version of the black bottom with the edges of their bloomers showing. It wasn't something Alan Lomax had collected with his other folk songs. Just one more dusty American butterfly in a glass case full of them. This was smut with just enough shine on it to keep the whole strutting bunch of them out of jail. Sarah Tidwell was singing about the dirty boogie, and I guessed that every overalled straw-hatted, plug-chewing, callous-handed, clodhopper-wearing farmer standing in front of the stage was dreaming about doing it with her, getting right down to where the sweat forms in the crease and the heat gets hot and the paint comes glimmering through. I started walking in that direction, aware of the cows mooing and the sheep blading, from the exhibition barns. The fair's version of my childhood hi-ho dairy-ho. I walked past the shooting gallery and the ring toss and the penny pinch. I walked past the stage where the handmaidens of Angelina were weaving in a slow, snake-like dance with their hands pressed together as a guy with a turban on his head and the shoe polish on his face tooted a flute. The picture painted on stretched canvas suggested that Angelina, on view inside of just 1/10 of a dollar, neighbor, would make these two look like old boots. I walked past the entrance to Freak Alley, the corn roasting pit, the ghost house, where more stretched canvas depicted spooks coming out of broken windows and crumbling chimneys. Everything in there is death, I thought. But from inside, I could hear the children, who were very much alive, laughing and squealing as they bumped into things in the dark. The older among them were likely stealing kisses. I passed the test your strength pole, where the gradations leading to the brass bell at the top were marked "Baby needs his bottle," "Sissy," "Try again," "Big boy," "He-Man," and just below the bell itself it read "Hercules." Standing at the center of the little crowd of young men with red hair was removing his shirt. Standing in the center of a crowd, a young man with red hair was removing his shirt, revealing a heavily muscled upper torso. A cigarette-smoking carny held a hammer out to him. I passed the quilting booth, a tent where people were sitting on benches and playing bingo, the baseball pitch. I passed them all and hardly noticed. I was in the zone, tranced out. "You'll have to call him back," Joe had sometimes told Harold when he phoned. "Michael is currently in the land of big make-believe." Only now nothing felt like pretend, and the only thing that interested me was the stage at the base of the Ferris wheel. There were 8 black folks up there on it, maybe 10, standing at the front, wearing a guitar, and wailing on it as she sang was Sarah Tidwell. She was alive. She was in her prime. She threw back her head and laughed at the October sky. What brought me out of the daze was a cry from behind me. Wait up, Mike, wait up! I turned and saw Kyra running toward me, dodging around the strollers and gamesters and midway gawkers with her pudgy knees pumping. She was wearing a little white sailor dress with red piping and a straw hat with a navy blue ribbon on it. In one hand she clutched Strickland, and when she got to me, she threw herself confidently forward, knowing I would catch her and swing her up. I did, and when her hat started to fall off, I caught it and jammed it back on her head. I tackled my own quarterback, she said and laughed again. That's right, I said. You're a regular Mean Joe Green. I was wearing overalls. The tail of the wash-faded blue bandana stuck out of the bib pocket, and the manure-stained work boots. I looked at Kyra's white socks and saw they were homemade. I would find no discreet little label reading Made in Mexico or Made in China if I took off her straw hat and looked inside either. This hat had been made most likely in Moughton by some farmer's wife with red hands and achy joints. Kai, where's Maddie? Home, I guess. She couldn't come. How did you get here? Up the stairs. It was a lot of stairs. You should have waited for me. You could have carrot me like before. I want to hear the music. Me too. Do you know who it is, Kyra? Yes, she said. Keto's mom. Hurry up, slowpoke. I walked toward the stage, thinking we'd have to stand at the back of the crowd, but they parted for us as we came forward, me carrying Kyra in my arms, the lovely, sweet weight of her, a little Gibson girl in her sailor dress and ribbon accent straw hat. Her arm was curled around my neck, and they parted for us like the Red Sea had parted for Moses. They didn't turn to look at us either. They were clapping and stomping and bellowing along with the music, totally involved. They stepped aside unconsciously, as if some kind of magnetism were at work here. Ours positive, theirs negative. A few women in the crowd were blushing, but clearly enjoying themselves. One of them laughing so hard tears were streaming down her face. She looked no more than 22 or 3. Kyra pointed to her and matter-of-factly, you know Maddie's boss at the library? The library. That's her Nana. Lindy Briggs' grandmother, and fresh as a daisy, I thought. Good Christ. The red tops were spread across the stage and under swags of red, white, and blue bunting like some time-traveling rock band. I recognized all of them from the picture in Edward Austin's book. The men wore white shirts, arm garters, dark vests, dark pants. Sonny Tidwell, at the end of the stage, was wearing a derby he'd had on in the photo. Sara, though. Why is the lady wearing Maddie's dress? Kyra asked me, and she began to tremble. I don't know, honey, I can't say. Nor could I argue. It was the white sleeveless dress Maddie had been wearing on the common, all right. On stage, the band was smoking through an instrumental break. Reginald, son Tidwell, strolled over to Sara, feet ambling, hands a brown blur on the strings and frets of his guitar, and she turned to face him. They put their foreheads together, she laughing and him solemn. They looked into each other's eyes and tried to play each other down. The crowd cheering and clapping, the rest of the Red Tops laughing as they played. Seeing them together like that, I realized that I had been right. They were brother and sister. The resemblance was too strong to be missed or mistaken. But mostly, what I looked at was the way her hips and butt switched in that white dress. Kyra and I might be dressed in the turn-of-the-century clothes, but Sara had thoroughly modern Millie. No bloomers for her, no petticoats, no cotton stockings, No one seemed to notice that she was wearing a dress that stopped above her knees, that she was all but naked by the standards of this time, and under Maddie's dress she'd be wearing garments the like of which those people had never seen, a lycra bra and hip hugger nylon panties. If I put my hand on her waist, the dress would slip not against an unwelcomed corset, but against soft, bare skin, brown skin, not white. What do you want, sugar? Sara backed away from Sonny, shaking her ungirdled, unbustled fanny and laughing. She strolled back to his spot. He strolled back to his spot, and she turned to the crowd as the band played the turnaround. She sang the next verse, looking directly at me. Before you startin' fishin', you better check your line. Said before you start a fishin', honey, you better check on your line. I'll pull on yours, darlin', and you best tug on mine. The crowd roared happily. In my arms, Kyra was shaking harder than ever. I'm scared, Mike, she said. I don't like that lady. She's a scary lady. She stole Maddie's dress. I want to go home. It was as if Sara heard her, even over the rip and ram of the music. Her head cocked back on her neck, her lips peeled open, and she laughed at the sky. Her teeth were big and yellow. They looked like the teeth of a hungry animal, and I decided I agreed with Kyra. She was a scary lady. Okay, honey, I murmured in Kai's ear. We're out of here. But before I could move, the sense of the woman, I don't know how else to say it, fell upon me and held me. Now I understood what had shot past me in the kitchen to knock away the Carla Dean letters. The chill was the same. It was almost like identifying a person by the sound of their walk. She led the band to the turnaround once more, then into another verse. Not one you'd find in the written verse of the song, though. I ain't gonna hurt her, honey, not for all the treasure in the world. Said I wouldn't hurt your baby, not for diamonds or for pearls. Only one black-hearted bastard dared touch that little girl. The crowd roared as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever heard, and Kyra began to cry. Sara saw this and stuck out her breasts, much bigger breasts than Maddie's, and shook them at her, laughing her trademark laugh as she did. There was a parodic coldness about this gesture, and an emptiness too, a sadness. Yet I could feel no compassion for her. It was as if the heart had been burned out of her, and the sadness which remained was just another ghost, the memory of love haunting the bones of hate. And how her laughing teeth leered. Sara raised her arms over her head, and this time shook it all the way down, as if reading my thoughts and mocking them, just like jelly on a plate, as some other old song of the time has it. Her shadow wavering the canvas backdrop, which was the painting of Freiberg, and as I looked at it, I realized I had found the shape from the Manderley dreams. It was Sara. Sara was the shape, and always had been. No, Mike, that's close, but it's not right. Right or wrong, I'd had enough. I turned, putting my hand on the back of Kai's head and urging her face down against my chest. Both her arms were around my neck now, clutching with panicky tightness. I thought I'd have to bull my way back through the crowd. They had let me in easy enough, but they might be a lot less amenable to letting me back out. Don't fuck with me, boys, I thought. You don't want to do that. And they didn't. On stage, Son Tidwell had taken the band from E to G. Someone began to bang the tambourine, and Sara went from Fish and Blues to Dog My Cats without a single pause. Out here, in front of the stage and below it, the crowd once more drew back from me and my little girl without looking at us or missing a beat as they clapped their work-swollen hands together. One young man, with a port wine stain swimming across the side of his face, opened his mouth. At 20, he'd already missing half his teeth and hollered, "Yee-haw," around a melting glob of tobacco. It was Buddy Jellison from the village cafe, I realized. Buddy Jellison magically rolled back in age from 68 to 20. Then I realized the hair was the wrong shade, light brown instead of black. Although he was pushing 70 and looking it in every other way, Bud hadn't a single white hair on his head. That was Buddy's grandfather, maybe even his great-grandfather. I didn't give a shit either way. I only wanted to get out of here. "Excuse me," I said, brushing by him. "There's no town drunk here, you meddling son of a bitch," he said, never looking at me and never missing a beat as he clapped. "We all just take turns." It's a dream after all, I thought. It's a dream, and that proves it. But the smell of tobacco on his breath wasn't a dream. The smell of the crowd wasn't a dream. And the weight of the frightened child in my arms wasn't a dream either. My shirt was hot and wet where her face had pressed. She was crying. "Hey, Irish," Sara called from the stage, and her voice was so like Joe's that I could have screamed. She wanted me to turn back. I could feel her will working on the sides of my face like fingers, but I wouldn't do it. I dodged around 3 farmers who were passing a ceramics bottle from hand to hand, and then I was free of the crowd. The midway lay ahead, wide as Fifth Avenue, and at the end of it was the arch, the steps, the street, the lake, home. If I could get to the street, we'd be safe. I was sure of it. "Almost done, Irish?" Sara shrieked after me. "Almost done, Irish," Sara shrieked after me. She sounded angry, but not too angry to laugh. "You're gonna get what you want, sugar. All the comfort you need. But you want to let me finish my business. Do you hear me, boy? Just stand clear and mind me now." I began to hurry back the way I'd come, stroking Kai's head, still holding her face against my shirt. Her straw hat fell off, and when I grabbed for it, I got nothing but the ribbons, which pulled free of the brim. No matter. We had to get out of here. On our left was the baseball pitch, and some little boys shouting, "Willie hit it over the fence, Ma! Willie hit it over the fence!" with monotonous, brain-groggling reality. We passed the bingo where some woman howled that she had won the turkey. By glory, every number is covered with the button, and she had won the turkey. Overhead, the sun dove behind a cloud, and the day was dull. Our shadows disappeared. The arch at the end of the midway drew closer with maddening slowness. "Are we home yet?" Kai almost moaned. "I want to go home, Mike. Please take me home to my mommy." "I will," I said. "Everything's going to be all right." We were passing the test your strength pole, where the young man in the red hair was putting his shirt back on. He looked at me with the red hair, where the young man with the red hair was putting his shirt back on. He looked at me with stolid dislike. Boy, the instinctive mistrust of a native for an interloper, perhaps, and I realized I knew him, too. He'd have a grandson named Dickie, who would, toward the end of the century to which this fair had been dedicated, own the all-purpose garage on Route 68. A woman coming out of the quilting booth stopped and pointed at me. At the same moment, her upper lip lifted in a dog snarl. I knew that face, too. From where? Somewhere around town. It didn't matter, and I didn't want to know even if it did. Hey, we never should have come here," Kai moaned. "I know how you feel," I said, "but I don't think we had any choice, hun. They came out the freak alley, perhaps 20 yards ahead. I saw them and stopped. There were 7 in all. Long striding men, dressed in peddler's clothes. Stop! But 4 didn't matter. Those 4 looked faded and white and ghostless. They were sick fellas, maybe dead fellas, or no more dangerous than daguerreotypes. The other 3, though, were real as the rest of the place anyway. The leader was an old man wearing a faded blue Union Army cap. He looked at me with eyes I knew, eyes I had seen measuring me over the top of the oxygen mask. Mike, why you stopping? It's all right, Kai. Just keep your head down. This is all a dream. We'll wake up tomorrow morning in your own bed. 'Kay? The jacks spread across the midway, hand to hand and boot to boot, blocking our way back to the arch in the street. Our old blue cap was in the middle. The ones on either side of him were much younger, some by maybe as much as half a century. 2 of the pale ones, the almost not there ones, were standing side by side on the old man's right, and I wondered if I could burst through that part of the line. I thought they were no more flesh than the thing which had thumped the insulation of the cellar wall. But what if I was wrong? Give her over, son, the old man said. His voice was reedy and implacable. He held out his hands. It was Max Devore. He had come back. Even in death, he was seeking custody. Yet it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't. The planes of the man's face were subtly different, the cheeks gauntier, and the eyes were brighter blue. Where am I? I called to him, assenting the last word heavily. And in front of Angelina's booth, the men in the turban, the Hindu who perhaps hailed from Sandusky, Ohio, put down his flute and simply watched. The snake girls stopped dancing and watched too, slipping their arms around each other and drawing together for comfort. Where am I, Devore? If our great-grandfathers shit in the same pit, then where am I? Ain't here to answer your questions. Give her over. I'll take her, Jared. One of the younger men, one of those who were really there, said. He looked at Devore with a kind of fawning eagerness that sickened me, mostly because I knew who it was, Bill Dean's father. The man who had grown up to be one of the most respected elders in Castle County was all but licking Devore's boots. Don't think too fondly of him, Joe whispered. Too badly of him, Joe whispered. Don't think too badly of any of them. They were very young. You don't need to do nothing, Devore said. His reedy voice was irritated. Fred Dean looked abashed. He's going to hand her over to his own, or on his own, and if he don't, we'll take her together. I looked at the men on the far left, the 3 of those that seemed totally real, totally there. Was this me? It didn't look like me. There was something in the face that seemed familiar, but hand her over, Irish, Devore said. Last chance. No. Devore nodded as if this is exactly what he expected. Then we'll take her. This has got to end. Come on, boys. They started toward me, and as they did, I realized who the one on the end, the one with the cocked tree walker boots and flannel logger pants, reminded me of Kenny Oster, whose wolfhound would eat cake till it busted. Kenny Oster, whose baby brother had been drowned under the pump by Kenny's father. I looked behind me. The red tops were still playing. Sara was still laughing, shaking her hips with her hands in the sky, and the crowd was still plugging the east end of the midway. That way was no good, anyway. If I went that way, I'd be raising a little girl in the early years of the 20th century, trying to make a living by writing penny dreadfuls and dime novels. That might not be so bad, but there was a lonely young woman miles and years from here who would miss her, who might even miss us both. I turned back and saw the Jack boys were almost on me. Some of them were more here than others, more vital, but all of them dead, all of them damned. I looked at the toe. I looked at the towhead, whose descendants looked at the towhead, whose descendants would include Kenny Oster, and asked them, "What did you do? What in Christ's name did you men do?" He held out his hands. "Give her over, Irish. That's all you have to do. You and the woman can have more, all the more you want. She's young. She'll pop 'em out like watermelon seeds." I was hypnotized, and they would have taken us if not for Kyra. "What's happening?" she screamed against my shirt. Something smells so bad. Oh, Mike, make it stop." And I realized I could smell it too. Spoiled meat and swamp gas, burnt tissue and simmering guts. Devore was the most alive of them all. Of all of them, generating the same crude but powerful magnetism I had felt around his great-grandson. But he was as dead as the rest of them, too. And as he neared, I could see the tiny bugs which were feeding in his nostrils and the pink corners of his eyes. Everything down here is death, I thought. Didn't my own wife tell me so? They reached out their tenebrous hands, first to touch Kai, then to take her. I backed up a step, looked to my right, and saw more ghosts. Some coming out of the busted windows, some slipping from red brick chimneys. Holding Kyra in my arms, I ran for the ghost house. "Get him," Jared DeVore yelled, startled. "Get him, boys. Get that punk, goddammit." Oh, we got pretty long ways to go for this chapter. Oh, yeah. All right. You know what? I think I'm going to read the rest of this. "Get that punk, goddammit." I sprinted up the wooden steps, vaguely aware of something soft rubbing against my cheek. Kai's little stuffed dog, still clutched in one of her hands. I wanted to look back and see how close they were getting, but I didn't dare. If I stumbled... "Hey," a woman at the ticket booth called. She had clouds of ginger hair, makeup that appeared to have been applied with a garden trowel, and mercifully resembled no one I knew. She was just a carny, just passing through this den- den- benighted place. Lucky her. "Hey, mister, you gotta buy a ticket." "No time, lady, no time." "Stop him," DeBoer shouted. "He's a goddamn punk thief. That ain't his youngin' he's got. Stop him." But no one did, and I rushed into the darkness of the ghost house with Kai in my arms. All right, I'm going to stop there. I need to go get my husband. Um, but I will be back to finish this chapter because we have quite a few to go. So we're going to stop right there. I am going to, you know what? I am actually not even going to stop this. I am just going to go and put it on. I think I'm just going to put it on Be Back Soon. I don't know if that's going to work either. Because I'm going to have to go again. You know what? Yeah, I better. I mean, I want to put it on Be Back Soon. But at the same time, I have to leave a half an hour after I get back to go get my daughter. So that might not work either because it's probably going to take me another 45 minutes to read. I don't know yet. So, yeah. Because I am looking at this. And I have read quite a bit in 45 minutes. So I don't know if it's going to take less than a half an hour to read. but that's okay. Because I do have that 20-minute one where I worked on. So what I'll do is I'm going to stop this, and I will be back around probably 9:30. So it's 9 o'clock now. I should be back around 9:30, and then I will start up and I will read what I can. That's probably not going to work either. Because that's not fair to you guys. So actually, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop there, and I'm going to come back at 10:30. When I get back with my daughter, it should be around 10:30, 10:40. And then I'm going to read 21. And if I'm not sleepy, I'm going to continue to 22. We're almost done with this book. We really are. We've only got this much left. Just this much. This is it. Just this little bit. We've got 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. 7 chapters after this one. That's it. That's all I got left. We've read 21 and a half chapters.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Nick.
You said that right?
Yeah. We are. We're almost done. So then we'll have to decide what we want to read next. So I am going to make this video where we are reading 20 to 21. And the next one, when I get back, we will read 21 and 22, I think. Because I don't see why I don't care. I don't see why I can't read another chapter tonight. First, we're going to take them out. Okay, so I will talk to you guys soon. I will be back here about 10:30. All right? All right. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sticking with me. And I will see you guys in about an hour and a half. All right. Bye.